a special presentation exclusively for Patreon supporters, a new monthly show titled PJ's Symposium of Media and Whimsy. This is a side project to our main show, Words and Whiskey, and for this first episode, I'm going to structure it similar to the main show, though that might get changed and moved around as we figure out what the show's going to be all about. But basically, the premise of the show, we're going to be breaking down some piece of media, whether it be a movie or a comic book, another novel, whatever it might be, whatever I'm feeling. And instead of it being a small section of the book like we do in Words and Whiskey, it's going to be the entire goddamn thing. So I, PJ, am actually leading this thing because I figured after constantly joking about taking over the main show from Crossland, I'd actually put my money where my mouth is and take charge of this boat, steer it right into an iceberg, probably.
And I, Kross, are your hapless, witless, not really action hero sidekick for this adventure through the story we're going to be talking about today. But before we really get into it, we want to say thank you. Thank you so much for listening along to our main show. Thank you for following along and donating to us on Patreon. It's because of you that we get to do fun shit like this. So really, from the bottom of our depthless, soulless, cold fleshless hearts, thank you. I'm trying to tie it back to Shadowpan, or not Shadowpan. Jesus Christ! Every time, Lopan, David, okay. David. Oh my God, what
to David?
Fucking David!
Damn it, David. So we are not necessarily going to structure this exactly the same, like I mentioned, but we will probably drink during the show. So I threw in a section where we talk about what we're drinking. So here's for some Cocktail Cock. What are you sipping on?
Cocktail Cock. Oh my God. I am having an old fashioned, of which I made an ill joke while I was recording a video for our Instagram on how to craft the thing, because we drink so many of them that I figured that it was a good one for us to like put out there and have, a video of. And I bought a bunch of shit so that I could actually do that. So I've got like a full tripod mount and this crazy light, and it looks awesome, and I'm so excited. But in my original take of that, I said, skin the orange like you might your favorite child. And I can't.
Very carefully.
Got
to keep it all intact.
Delicately, and maybe drug it up first.
All right.
Yeah, that's what I'm drinking, and a fuck ton of water because I've had a weekend, let me tell you.
All right. Good deal. I decided to go with a sort of refreshing cocktail, a twist on one of my favorite mixed drinks. So it is called a Benedict, and I even kind of twisted that a little bit. But it's essentially a whiskey ginger with Benedictine, and then I added a little bit of lime juice and a lime wedge and cocktail cherry. Served in a highball, just nice little sparkly fizzy drink. And I am following that up with Juice Senior, which is a triple IPA made with honey from Great Notion Brewing Company.
Nice. That sounds really good.
Yeah. Excited to give it a shot.
As
heard a lot of good things about Great Notion, and I've never had anything by them. So saw them in the store. Didn't realize that the liquor store near me carried them ever. So I grabbed a can.
Cool.
I guess that covers the cocktail stuff. So
yeah, you're in charge of transitions. Isn't this wild?
I know. It's weird. Let's get into the movie. Today we are talking about one of my absolute favorite movies of all times. It is the 80s cult classic John Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China, starring Kurt Russell as Jack Burton. Crossland, want to give these fine listeners a short synopsis of this masterpiece that we'll be talking about all evening?
Absolutely. So Kurt Russell plays hard-boiled truck driver Jack Burton, who gets caught in a bizarre conflict within and underneath San Francisco's Chinatown. An ancient Chinese prince and Chinatown's crime lord has kidnapped a beautiful green-eyed woman who's the fiancée to Jack's best friend. Jack must help his friend rescue the girl before the evil Lopan uses her to break the ancient curse that keeps him a fleshless and immortal spirit. Might I say, I think it's a little aggressive to maybe say that Wang is Jack Burton's best friend.
They're good. They're close acquaintances at best.
Yeah, it didn't feel like that at first. It felt like there was a lot of tension in that gambling scene.
Yeah, there really was. might I say, great job writing that synopsis.
Oh, that's not me. That was the marketing team.
I know. I know.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm basically stealing the shit from the marketing team and constructing those summaries. So,
yeah, I saw you copy and paste it.
Oh, yeah. I'm
document.
definitely not writing these summaries each time. I am definitely using whatever they send out. We can talk about how bullshitty they are.
Absolutely. But let's transition into actually getting some original opinions. So right off the bat, we've got one of my favorite movie openings ever, starting with Egg talking to his lawyer. I like it so much because the exposition and the subtle world building just kind of naturally come out. Egg's conversation works basically as a retroactive conclusion, but it doesn't force the story to be told from his perspective. And it doesn't go back to this scene or anything like this scene at the end of the movie, which makes it feel kind of elegantly done. I'm coming at this having seen the movie tons of times, though, so I'm interested in what you're thinking about it, having not seen it before. And if it paid off, if it was confusing, what'd you think?
So for me, it was so interesting because right off the bat, it's worth addressing up front. The reason that I'd avoided this movie, despite it being your favorite movie, and you had even maybe said this, is that it's perhaps dated. And when you said dated action movie titled Big Trouble in Little Chinatown, I was like, oh shit, this is going to be a pile of like really bad racial stereotypes on top of a number of other things that I just expected this sort of heavy-handed bad 80s movie, like that's kind of the thing at the time. And, exploitation in its own right was kind of happening in that period. So for me, I avoided this movie because I was like, I really don't want to have that conversation. And you're like, I'm in charge. You're watching the fucking movie. And I was like, okay, all right, ooh, here we go. And the beginning with Egg in particular is really great for almost that reason. But it did immediately tread the line of kind of the Orientalist thing. And I was like, oh no, don't be bad. And then it only got better. It did a great job setting the scene, the tone, and the world. But at the same time, when I finished the movie, I immediately rewatched the first 20 minutes just to, see how that all paid off appropriately. And it was good. So I wanted to just see, those components again and how they kind of pay off and set up the movie. And as a blind viewer going into the beginning, I think it's great. After you've gotten to some of the Egg stuff that happens later in the story, you can kind of feel that this was a scene that was not originally written for the script and was instead added post, in reshoots and a test screening or post test screening to give a little bit more depth. Because I think that seeing Egg use lightning so early kind of undoes some of the humor of him being the tour bus driver and then also being the opposite to the super evil spirit, right?
Absolutely.
That to me was the biggest. I was like, it's kind of a letdown. But it did a really great job setting the stakes in the scene and kind of asking questions so you knew what you were walking into later. I just wish, if there's any one tiny thing that I would change about this entire movie, it's that I wouldn't have revealed the lightning hands moment.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. There is something else that, in my sort of behind the scenes research of this a little bit, they pointed out something that really does kind of irk me a little bit because this scene was added in post after some executives decided that the movie didn't show Jack Burton to be enough of a hero. So it added this scene in with Egg defending Jack Burton, saying we're in his debt and all that to make him seem like a better hero. But Jack Burton is not a good hero in this movie.
Jack Burton also doesn't do exactly. Jack Burton doesn't do shit but throw the knife in the dude's head. That's it. He's a supportive friend, but that's about it.
He's the main character, but he's not the main hero.
I don't even think he's the main character.
That's it. Yeah, that's fair.
I have a very laced throughout the commentary and script here. I have my working theory of what Jack Burton is, which we'll definitely get into.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I agree. But it's interesting that you point out that it does undermine a little bit of the movie. This first scene, I love the world building. I love the expose that it does and how elegantly it's done. But it does kind of ruin some components of it a little bit.
It's worth noting, too, on the very front end of this entire conversation, that this one does feel like a Jack Carpenter movie for sure. To the photography and the shooting in this movie, including the action, pays both homage to the earlier this isn't the right word, but cheesier, the origin point of a lot of Chinese martial arts films, and like really is sort of grounded in it and takes that tone and kind of moves it in a campy direction a lot later in the movie. And that's why it's so good. Like he knew exactly what he was doing. And this scene feels out of place for exactly that reason. The scene doesn't feel goofy. It feels very self-serious.
It is. It is for sure. So, but that said, like I said, it's one of my favorite openings because it does it so cleanly.
I'm so conflicted about this. This is like my only point in the entire movie where I'm like, yeah, it's really good. But also, why'd you have to make Egg show that he was a magician right away?
Exactly. But right after that scene, we get what was intended to be the opening scene of the movie, which is Jack in his semi driving down the open road, talking to a CB radio.
Hauling ass.
Right up, like hauling ass. Just from the jump, what did you think of him as a character, and how did it set up your expectations for him going forward?
He's an American nut job, and that's exactly how like I wanted to view him. Is he? And this is the theory that I want to go over for the entire story. He is a clunky hero without a doubt. He isn't really even a hero, but he is a stand-in for the audience. I think for the entire movie, Jack Burton is the exposition machine, asking the questions to sort of flesh out the culture in the world. And so he is a stand-in for us who might not be aware of some of those Eastern culture, Eastern components of the story. So I really dig him for that reason. But as a character, he's written intentionally as this like one note 80s hero being taken non-seriously basically by everyone else, including his love interest like Grace Law. The way that she like rolls him off, like just
which, by the way, Grace Law, the lawyer.
Yeah, I know. I was like, what? No, you're kidding me. This movie just gets funnier as it goes forward. Like at first it's like peppering out all these little details, like the fact that fucking Wang knows that she's a lawyer. How, by the way, like he just knows that. The way so many,
she lives in the neighborhood.
True. So many times he just like whips out information. You're like, what? Like, what? Huh? And then it pays off later in an even funnier way. Like it escalates, and I love it.
It's so good.
Oh my God.
The other point of this intro scene is giving the name of his truck, which is the Pork Chop Express, which I love. I love the name of his truck.
It's so good that he's a trucker and he's like the co-hero here. Like I said, I like the term like American nut job because he is definitely crazy.
He's, of course, but he's also arrogant and confident and self-centered. And just everything, he is shouting into the void on the CB radio.
Yeah. The most
almost
heinous.
Like what we're doing here.
Yes.
I like your take on this, that he's the stand-in for the audience, and that tracks all the way through. I had never considered that, but that absolutely tracks coming through.
But I mean, the audience in a story is mostly useless as well, which is the other part of this that I love, is because he is fucking useless. It only gets better.
We do start to see some of his charm after that. After he gets into Chinatown, he parks his truck after going through this really crowded alley with a fucking semi. And you see some workers unloading his truck of chickens, and he's chatting up the street vendor, eating some dumplings. Like you get the sense that he's pretty charismatic. And then it cuts to him in this gambling scene with, as the snippet that you posted says, his best friend Wang, and he wins a little over $1,000. Wang gives him a double or nothing or double.
Nothing or double, which this was again those moments when I actually felt tense, where I was like, oh, is this going to go off like the racial deep end? And then it didn't. Mm-hmm. And like this, and then it kind of doubled down and it continued to expand and go wider. I sent you my original notes as I was going through and watching the movie, and you can clearly tell that I noticed the tonal shift. But in the beginning, I was very concerned for Wang as a character. Like I was like, oh, please don't be bad in one note. Like, do not let that happen.
With Wang's introduction, we kind of start to see one of, in my opinion's biggest weaknesses of this film, and it's dialogue that kind of persists through the entire film's character introductions. Sort of clunky, awkward, forced, and just kind of overall breaks the immersion of the film. Did you notice that? Maybe it was just me having seen the movie a bunch of times and overanalyzing it?
I think.
What do you think?
I think it might be a little bit of that, because at first I did feel like Wang's introduction felt a little bit clunky and some of his early dialogue. But after going back and rewatching it the second time, all of that feels very intentional. And so it came off as clunky initially, when like watching it the first time. But when doubling back over it, it's so clear that Wang is almost omniscient early on in the story. And he while a clunky perhaps introduction, I feel like that's the intentional nature of the script, and it reminds me of early Westerns. We haven't talked about this yet, but the script has a very interesting history where it started off as it started the same concepts, but it was a Western from the 1880s set in San Francisco, meant to be set in kind of an establishing of Chinatown, and it was adapted by a different writer, W.D. Richter, who took the original two writers' scripts and changed it into this masterpiece and just shifted all of these things. So especially if you look at the way that characters are introduced, they actually aren't introduced differently than they would be in a Western, where they kind of are gathering troops as they roll through the story and explore the opposition. So at first, in particular, Wang and Grace felt...
Grace is the one that I get hung up on the most.
They felt...
Just walking in, hi, it's me, Gracie Law.
Oh, no, I love that. I thought that was way better. It was actually her first introduction at the airport that I thought was clunkier.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
Than the introduction at that point where she just walks in and says her name. Because at that point, the film has already established its sort of camp nature, and it's already beginning to become apparent that this is aping action movies and making fun of them.
You definitely get the sort of tongue-in-cheek aspect of it with the reporter when they're talking about Lopan.
Oh my God.
And she says, David Lopan, the Lopan that runs this business and hasn't been seen in how many years, that Lopan? And there's like Eddie in the background rolling his eyes.
Yeah, especially
like they definitely lean more into the tongue-in-cheek aspect of it in that one.
The lines of like, exactly that, you idiot. And like there's a couple of times, that wasn't directed towards the reporter, but there's at least one time where that's directed towards Jack. I think it's actually a similar scene. I must be so monumentally naive. And one of the other characters just goes, you are. Like replying
that was the reporter and then Eddie.
Yeah. And that is such an example of this movie knowing exactly what it is. And so even the earlier moments where the characters feel clunky, on a retread, on that rewatch of the first 20 minutes, like I was saying, it felt crystal clear that they were meant to be similar to the way that characters are introduced later and also made fun of. We as the audience in that first 20 minutes are confused because we are also Jack Burton. We don't really know what's going on, and Jack Burton has no fucking clue what's going on, and Wang knows everything. And so we are exposed to the story through Jack Burton so that we actually get an understanding of the Lords of Death and the other gangs that come up over the course of the story.
Yeah, so that starts to lean more into the comedy aspect of this a lot more. We get the many Chinese hells that are constantly being called out. And there's the conversation that Gracie's having with Wang and his uncle and Eddie and everything else in that restaurant. And Jack says, I'm feeling a little like an outsider here. You are, is the response to that. So just that reinforces the like lack of understanding that Jack has, like you mentioned, the lack of understanding that we have, and then rooting it in comedy, which I think is a really nice way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, rooting it in comedy is definitely necessary, and I think it also starts to sell the tone. And the great part about that is that I think that it helps bury the lead that this is not going to be a white savior movie, which is another concern of genre at the time. Like there are other movies that did excellent portrayals of culture, but the protagonist in the movie was a white dude who saved the day. And so that was a big problem at the time. And so that's why it ultimately is so well done that Jack Burton is this arrogant piece of shit who doesn't know anything, who is an outsider, and they call him out for it directly. You know, you would honest to God, you wouldn't believe that this feels like it could come out today as a commentary on 80s movies, 80s, 90s action movies. But it was in the middle of it, like in the middle of that action movie phenomenon. It's there. It just exists. I'm so shocked.
Yeah. As far as timing in the release goes, when they were starting to do the casting for this film, one of the first choices for Wang was Jackie Chan. And the studio was concerned that he wasn't well enough known to American audiences and that he wouldn't have a good enough grasp on English. Like, that was their concern for all this. So had this been a little bit later, obviously Jackie Chan became a huge martial art movie like mainstay, clearly. And they probably would have jumped all over it, but I don't know if it would have gone as well having him in it. I like that Wang is younger and pluckier and not a master martial artist.
I think what's so shitty about that take from executives, though, about Jackie Chan is that so much of this movie is also rooted, like, this just shows again a disconnect in the executives from the creative team that actually made the fucking movie. This gets my blood boiled in particular, because as I was doing research about this, I just kept getting angrier at the decisions the executives were making. John Carpenter and the casting director and everyone else involved very clearly picked people that were at different experience levels with English, with accents. Are you American Chinese? Are you Chinese Chinese? Like, they very specifically were pulling from everyone, because that's the way that the world is. That's the way that Chinatown, San Francisco is. And they wanted to be representative of the, like, do they have an accent? Do they speak English well? And that's so frustrating. Yes, I agree with you. I think it's better to have Wang cast here. But to hear that it was like, we're not sure if he can speak English well enough to, like, fill out that role just feels like the shittiest reason for an executive
for sure
to nix this, considering how aware, and I don't even like using this term, but this movie for the 80s is woke. Like, it is ahead of
it really kind of
it is ahead of the curve in every way. And that was, again, the most shocking thing to me. I went around and I just searched, and there are so many. I was expecting, like I said, going into this, I was expecting badness. I was expecting Orientalist stereotypes and just all of that out the window.
Insensitivity.
Yeah, I was very much expecting that, and I'm just going to keep coming back to this. I was so surprised and shocked, and when I Googled just to make sure that I wasn't going insane, it was only doubled down on by every single article or thought piece that I read. So I was pleased. The internet is clearly pleased. There's a reason that this is a cult classic. John Carpenter is mostly God sometimes.
Well, there you go. There you have it. I think I was just talking about the comedy sort of aspects of all this. As a kid, watching this movie, falling in love with this movie, I primarily thought of this as a comedy with some action and fantasy elements to it. Now, that's completely reversed at having watched it again today, twice. It's much more of a tightly structured fantasy action movie that's just sprinkled with comedy throughout. I love this movie more and more every time I watch it.
It's so shocking. It was shocking to me too. It's got Monty Python grade humor grenades inside of it, which is what's so good when they go off. They just don't make movies like this anymore, unfortunately. Or actually, some people do. Their names are Chris Lord and Phil Miller. Chris Lord, Phil Miller. They write movies like this, but there are very few people that can write something that fits this way. And to me, I loved the comedy, and it does have that fantasy action movie with the intentional camp. And everything is so intentional in this movie. It totally rocks for those reasons. It's paying homage to things. I was shocked. I'm just going to keep going back to that. I was absolutely blown away.
Good. I'm glad that you had such a terrible opinion of what I liked in my movies that you were shocked enough when it was actually good.
Well, no, I knew that Big Trouble in Little China was funny. And I was like, okay, so is it funny because it's leaning in on and there's some bad shit around it? And I was like, if you're a kid and you like it, you can't, you're indoctrinated as a kid. You can't you can't help it. But if it stood the test of time, there's got to be a reason. So I was, I'm not calling you a bad person or anything. We like what we like, and sometimes it's a bunch of dog shit. I don't know.
I will admit I like dog shit sometimes.
I fucking still listen to Brand New, and that's worse, arguably. but I don't talk about it. So except for now I have, which is fucked. Anyway,
we'll get back on track a little bit and talk about the movie itself. The three storms are basically in the movie the entire time, but we don't learn a whole lot about them. What did you think of them as story elements? And do you think keeping them a bit of a mystery added to or took away from the story overall?
So it's rain, thunder, and lightning, right? Those are the three storms.
I think so, yeah.
The storms to me are a great component of the story. I think to get any more specific would have been a mistake, actually. I think that vague things, especially in a movie, provide higher stakes as we're unclear on what they are truly capable of. This is actually a technique that horror does the best. It is all about obfuscating what's actually going on until you get to a point where you understand exactly what they are, what they can do. And so to me, the storms that's John Carpenter's way of working in some of these sort of horror elements and questions, and sort of his mastery of the camera, of storytelling, really comes through to me most of all inside of the storms. I think that they capture the sort of it factor, the questions that linger about the story more than anything else. Yeah,
that's totally fair. I think it's also important to note, or to make note of, the fact that this is like a 93-minute long movie.
Yeah.
Like, it is compact.
Yeah.
So you'd need to make the movie a lot longer to give enough expose to really understand who these mythical crazy dudes are.
John Carpenter is obviously famous for a lot of movies, right? And one of the things that I just want to point out that directly connected for me as an example to point to people is in The Thing, we don't really want to know all the full details of what The Thing is, you know? Like, we don't want to have that explained, at the very least up front, for sure, because that ruins some of the mystique and the mystery and the bone-chilling horror that sits with you when you actually exit the movie and you wonder at the very end of that movie what actually happened. You know, you don't want that explained. You don't want that firm ending. That's what a good short story does, is it leaves you with that larger question. And I think that this goes all the way back to Hitchcock, where, like, you have the birds and you're focusing in on one person's perspective, and then you see that at the very end of the movie, it just opens up in a big way, and you realize that everything else is also fucked way worse than what you were watching the original movie.
Do you think part of that is because understanding a character and element makes it less scary?
Yes, entirely. It makes it less of a threat. And so,
or makes it more relatable, I guess.
Well, it means that you know its rules. So if you know the rules, then you know what it can and can't violate. And so that's why it's important, especially when you're approaching the end of a villain, like we do in the end of this movie, where I think it's Thunder can really just like expand his chest or like expand himself. We don't know what he's fully capable of, and then we find that he's not really capable of much more than what he was doing the whole time. Lightning is another good example where he appears to have control of the lightning, but he actually can't really aim it, which is, intentionally funny, because like lightning goes in weird patterns. And so like we're afraid of him early, and then it becomes a joke because he can't actually really control it. You
can't hit shit.
Yeah, right. It's, to me, that's what is so well done about them, is he answers those questions so late in these kind of vague ways that it leaves you with the impression of weakness, and it makes the heroes feel heroic in their own right when they die. That's something I want to talk about later when we actually get to talk about the end of them. But
we've mentioned this a couple times already, but I have it in the notes, and I guess I'll go through it and see if you have any more specific thoughts on it. Looking at this movie from a modern lens, it might be tempting to dismiss it as insensitive to Chinese culture, given that the lead of the film is a white guy. But as we've mentioned, he really isn't necessarily the hero of the film.
He's like the fucking marketing for the film, which is what's wild.
He really is. Do you have any additional thoughts or opinions or meanderings of the racial aspect of the film and how they were handled?
I have a lot to say as we get to kind of the end of the movie, and when we can talk about it all encompassing in its own right. But I've already made clear that I think Jack is the exposition machine for people, for the audience that doesn't understand this culture. You could compare this very well to some of the decisions that I adore the Doctor Strange movie. However, it is also clear that they aren't really taking in and acknowledging Chinese culture in the same way by not using fully Chinese characters And that was actually a weird change from the original Ancient One to cast Tilda Swinton, who also kills her role as the Ancient One. Is a weird decision to have a Celtic person be in this spot. Part of that's also because of the original comics and the way that they were written. But just to compare those two pieces against each other, this movie that came out 30 years before does a way better job of being culturally acknowledging of the story and preventing a white savior complex from emerging. You know, the good news about Doctor Strange is it borrows from the Eastern cultures, and then the rest of the movie doesn't focus on that at all. That's not the point of the movie, thankfully. So it doesn't like double down into something awful like, I don't know, The Great Wall with Matt Damon in it, where he's basically playing a role that any other person should have played of, you know, fucking miscast for sure. Whitewashed casting. Those are my thoughts. To the other racial aspects, I want to comment that they don't make Chinese here a monoculture as well. It's a part of the story, but everyone has, like I said before, everyone has these different grades of accents, some completely with and some without. There's the shouting in Chinese, which is not dubbed, which I actually really appreciated in a strange way, because it made it just be like, oh, I have no clue. And I wouldn't have a clue because I'm Jack Burton here. And he would not know what's going on in this moment of the scene. So I'm left in the dark because I don't really understand. But I'm sure they're probably good, funny lines if you speak Chinese. And it's a good thing to not have that subtitled, actually.
They do nod to that a little bit right when they get into Lopan's palace. And there's the Chinese writing on one of the garage doors. Mm-hmm. Or one of the doors that Wang has to like lockpick open. Jack asks him, what's that say? And Wang's response is, hell of boiling oils. And he's like, really? What? He's like, no, it says keep out.
That's, again, just another example of why they're just so good. By not treating his characters as an easy joke, he creates something, the team here creates something that is fucking real and that pays real effective and earnest homage to the culture embodied throughout the entire movie. Mm-hmm. It is all of these tiny decisions that come together. Writing a movie, creating a movie, in my estimation, is probably harder than most other art components, but it really is like building a plane while it's flying, because you don't know what's going to end up in the edit room, and then the editing process is really where the movie is built, and you only get to this place if you are so intentional in the front end with the footage and everything else that you capture. And boy, oh boy, this is, like you said, it's a tight movie, but it is well orchestrated throughout.
For sure. Going into that point a little bit more with Jack Burton, action hero, TM, he almost never actually gets involved in combat directly. Yeah. He fumbles with the safety of his Uzi, so he doesn't actually get into combat at one point. He accidentally throws his knife while trying to take it out of his boot. He knocks himself out by firing his gun into the cement ceiling, and just overall kind of bumblefucks his way through the film, while the other characters actually get shit done and prove themselves as good fighters. I loved it. I loved the way that Jack Burton does fuck all the entire time.
Yeah. I really think that for me, it highlighted this best in Act 2 when Wang actually does all the killing, when like he's trying to get his knife out of his boot or whatever after they're cutting through the door, and Wang has beat the shit out of everyone that Jack didn't, initially shoot when they were kind of coming through the door before he ran out of ammo. And he takes Jack takes 2 minutes basically to get ready for the combat. And within that 2 minutes, Wang has, killed or knocked out every single other person. So to me, that is just a perfect example of that. I think letting him getting to kill Lo Pan is also well done and well earned. We'll get to that when we get to that. But I think that being his only use means that the first line in the film, or the first couple of lines in the film that we talked about earlier with Egg, makes sense, even though, anyone could have done it.
There is one guy towards the beginning of the film that both he and Eddie are shooting at, and it's not really clear who gets the killing blow, but they're both shooting at him. And Eddie says, "Is that the first time you plug somebody?" He's like, "Of course not." clearly lying through his teeth.
Yeah. To me, what's also really interesting about Jack Burton as a character is he is meant to be the everyman, this American nut job, the trucker dude. And in reality, the everyman is pretty bad at things. Like most people whether they're willing to admit it or not, are not very talented or good at anything. Most people are C's. The average is a C. The distribution on there, the distribution curve of skill, that's how it exists. And Jack Burton basically being thrust into this story is like, you're fucking no. Like, it'd be like if you or I were pulled into a situation like this. We'd be mostly useless. Like, I've shot a gun, but I've definitely not killed anyone that you know of. But yeah, to me, that's just like, it's an extra layer on top of this thing, which is why when I was watching it, I was like, there's so much here. I love this. Good recommendation.
Oh, good.
But
I'm glad you liked it. So you have another show on this Patreon feed with Andrew talking about music, right? Mm-hmm. So I just want to plug that first of all.
Yep.
If you haven't listened to that, go listen to that one. If it's not out yet, wait until it's out and then listen to that one.
Correct.
I'm not sure how this is all going.
It's going to be called Hardpan. So this is coming out first, Hardpan second, and then third week we're going to have Speculative Knowledge come out. So that's the game plan.
Okay, perfect. But in that vein, what did you think of the musical score of the movie?
So I am a sucker for John Carpenter soundtracks because I love 80s synth stuff. It brings back, I mean, horror is rooted in 80s synth and 70s synth. Like Stephen King is almost interchangeable with this style of score. When you think of a lot of these things, or you think about that, you might think of like Fangoria's like creepy introduction that they do, which is also the same like sparkle synth. For those of you who maybe haven't steeped yourself in this like horror culture that I exist in, you would get the same thing from Stranger Things. This is Stranger Things theme exists because of what John Carpenter did for horror in music. And it's so interesting that basically he took the same approach and like wrapped it into an action movie. John Carpenter is interesting because he actually wants so much creative control on the side of how a movie goes that him also being in charge of the soundtrack really lets him hit the emotional notes that he wants to inside of a movie. So he actually, as opposed to shoring that off to someone else, he also gets to build the tension and break the tension with the soundtrack, and that leads to just excellent moments. I mean, there's some great moments. Is there a highlight that like my favorite part of the score? No, I didn't listen to it that closely. I was more focused on everything else that I loved. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the score.
Yeah, I was less going into the specifics of the score and more going into the vibe that it gave. It's essentially just synth and drums, which I loved it.
Yeah.
It is so stereotypically 80s movie without being outdated, I guess.
Yeah. Another component here that I just want to point out is I actually didn't know that Jack Carpenter directed this, which is another reason I wouldn't have avoided it if I would have known. John Carpenter, sorry. If I would have known that John Carpenter had directed it, I would have watched it earlier. There's almost no question because I've yet to be like fully, I mean, John Carpenter's, not all of John Carpenter's movies are perfect, but I will give anything John Carpenter a chance. And when I saw that he did the score, I was like, really? And then I Googled it for the first time just to see like a credit list, and because I didn't know who directed it, and I saw that he directed it, and I was like, oh, fuck, I'm in for a ride. All right, nice. And that literally happened within the first like 10 seconds of the movie while it's cutting over the lawyer's office. Also, side note with Egg, why is he speaking? It almost would have been better for him to not be speaking to that lawyer. It would have been more clever for him to maybe be speaking to Grace in that moment. And then you wouldn't have,
I don't know.
And then you wouldn't have had to reveal the like magic. You wouldn't have to do it there because they would have been like talking about it in legal counsel. And
because this was a reshoot, this was after the fact.
Stupid again. But also good.
This was all that scene was added after the fact, so I'm guessing they couldn't get
probably not. You're right.
Her back. They could just get Egg.
Yeah,
and they decided to go with it.
That's fair. I love, and I also, it's the only point of contention for me in the entire movie. So
that's fair. So knowing John Carpenter does a lot with monsters and horror and stuff like that, what would you actually consider the genre of this movie to be? Because like I said, as a kid, I always thought about this as a comedy. Now I think of it almost as like a fantasy adventure comedy, but there's also horror elements. It's like a monster horror adventure fantasy comedy. And I don't know where to stop and where to draw that line. What do you think?
So it's so interesting. And what a lot of people don't consider is that there are sort of two ways to view a lot of fiction. Fantasy is really anything that has sort of unreal elements tied into it, even if it's grounded in reality. And science fiction is, of course, an extension of that. So almost all non-slasher horror is fantasy. So I would say it's a fantasy comedy. Yep, that's what I would do. Comedy, fantasy, something
Sounds
like that.
good.
It is an action movie as well. So action, fantasy, comedy, something like that.
So second half of the movie, we start seeing the monsters, like the orange thing that kidnaps Gracie and the Oracle and the thing that comes out of the water. The fact that they're all clearly done with practical effects, I think brings sort of an extra charm to the movie, but that's Carpenter, right?
That is very Carpenter. When I saw that, I was like, oh, fuck yeah, dude, you got your creature moment in here. Love it. Love it. John Carpenter is obsessed with practical effects, creatures, everything like that. So to see that, you can see that in any of his other movies, especially earlier works and things like that. I mean, The Thing is also a great example of sort of the body horror that he does when like thunder dies. It's kind of the same thing that happens in The Thing when the Thing takes over. Have you seen The Thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Not gonna spoil it or anything like that, but just trying to create an analog. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely loved it. This is maybe the one part where I was like, does this fit perfectly? The Beast is the weirdest thing to me because it feels so interesting because it is meant to be a real depiction of art of some form of Chinese creature from the East. And like specifically when the eyes move in the painting, the creature itself is the embodiment of that image, that painting that we see. So this was the one. Yeah. This was maybe the only thing where I was like, did this age well? And I think the creature itself does, but I wonder about the sort of. I don't know enough to know anything about the basis of the culture of where that creature originates. I know a lot of the Japanese analogs like Shingani and stuff like that, like Shingami. You can start to get into some of those, and I can talk more readily about it. And I would say, I love it. I love the creature design. I don't know about the sensitivity or how that fits, but that's maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not so much worried about the sensitivity.
Oh, the practical effects stand out.
It as a character or as an element of the movie doesn't seem to fit that well, and it doesn't seem to have enough screen time to really gain the importance. So it feels a little bit shoved in there, and I'm wondering if that's either just lost on the cutting room floor or if he was just trying to find a way to fit monsters in a little bit.
I think maybe a little bit of A and a little bit of B. This feels like something that an original scriptwriter might not have put in, but he put in to create connective tissue for the movie so that it could move forward and advance Grace's story where she gets captured. The other component that I would say that this does is it feels like, especially at the end, that this might have been setting up a sequel of some kind. Not that it needed one or needs one, but especially given that the creature survives and is in the back of the truck, it maybe felt like this was leaning in to say that there might be more story to tell, not from all of these other perspectives, but maybe there's another Jack Burton story where I would think the move, if you were to create a sequel for this movie, would be to move and have Jack Burton experience another culture entirely. I don't know how the Beast would fit that, but that would be, that was kind of a weird holdover thought, but I agree with you. This stands out as a Carpenterism between this and actually the like floating bodies and the Oracle. Those are the three moments, the three components to me that were like, oh, okay, so John Carpenter did this. And the way that he cuts to close up on the skeletons that are waterlogged is very much that was a moment where it was like, oh, okay, so this is John Carpenter. You pulled in your little horror element. We got our nice little scare there. And yeah, I think that's really good. Also, that moment in particular encompasses why 80s horror is so much better than most modern horror that relies on jump scares, because there's something terrifying about the idea that these people were drowned alive and then have just been floating there ever since. That is scary. You don't need to have that body fall on me inside of the pit in order to make me more afraid. Right. They've been here this long. Why is a couple footsteps going to disturb them enough to move? Like, just let them be there and be terrifying. Yeah. It's just speaks to the sort of changing adrenaline nature of everything. But yeah, agreed. One thing I did just think of as far as an answer to my own question, I guess, the existence of the Beast makes the existence of the Oracle
which is an important part of the movie, more reasonable, I guess.
Yes.
Having these crazy monsters.
That's a fair point. It does
developed.
It does set the canons of probability a little bit.
I don't know. Just thought of that while you were talking.
Yeah.
We get some early introduction to Egg, but when he joins to invade the palace, we start to realize how important he is to the story, which we kind of get that a little bit in the intro scene, like you mentioned. But we also learn that he's kind of the old prophecy destined adversary to Lo Pan. Given that importance, do you think he should have had more prominence to the film overall? Or do you think they did a good job of leading into that, with the exception of that first intro scene?
So the intro scene breaks it for me, because I think that other than that, he is an amazing add to this story. It is so funny that he is effectively the getaway driver for the first couple of like moments and like introing, especially with the tour and everything like that along the way. Showing up to be the actual secret grandmaster is the campiest part of this movie, and it's so good, but it's also completely underplayed by showing that he has lightning control in the first part of the story. If he instead would have just nodded and been like, yes, there's magic in the world, and they would have cut away and not had like the lawyer ask for proof and then the magic hands show up, it would have been better. And this also makes sense because from here, Carpenter became very disillusioned with Hollywood and sort of the executive control over movies. And to me, single-handedly, it feels like that first scene is probably the scene that broke Carpenter's back, because it underplays the rest of it by giving away the lightning hands, giving away the idea that he is the sort of opposite to this big bad that we've had the whole time. You're telling me the tour bus driver is the opposite to this like fleshless ghost who can walk through walls? That's amazing. That's so good. Yeah. Damn it. Exactly. But it's still a really great reveal when it happens. It's just like you kind of know in the back of your head that like Egg is important because he's got lightning hands. So like the tour bus thing, you're like, why are you driving a tour bus? It creates the wrong question in my head, but it's the only thing that hurts my enjoyment of this movie. Really like it. It also kind of takes away from the storms. It makes the storms less cool when they show up as well, because we've already seen the lightning hands. It's like, oh, okay, so other people also have control over things like this. Okay. Egg's not our only person. Whereas the fantasy getting introduced in kind of the middle of the story when we see the storms fly on lightning, which, by the way, climbing up lightning, super cool. Like, that's wild. It's man, I just again screams the intervention problem from executives in movies, and how a script and a director and an editor generally do better, and when they're given full control over something, they generally do better than whatever the intervening thought was.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. It's
I agree.
One final like note here. The best creative advice that I have ever gotten is something that I think about all the time in the context of movies. The people that you share your first draft or your second draft with, in this case, like test audiences, they might point to a problem that the movie has, or they might say that there's this issue and I would pose this solution. The key is to listen to the question that they're pointing to, not to take their solution because they don't understand you and your creative process and your goal. So it's not a good idea to take their solution, but it is a good idea if multiple people mention it to take heed to what they're pointing to as a problem and try to reposition your story by thinking about that problem. Executives basically step in and say, okay, we're going to write the problem and we're going to fix the problem for you. And directors more often than not are like, what the fuck, dude? Not the right move. And that's literally the story of Zack Snyder's Justice League. So it's just like screams at me. But yeah,
there you
tirade.
Go.
Sorry.
There you go. Continuing on. The wedding scenes are certainly a bit odd.
I love them.
Me too. But beginning with the trial of the taming of the burning blade, Lo Pan mentions it mentions the ceremony to Gracie in the White Room where Miao Lin is floating strangely. Did you like the inclusion of the scene? It definitely added more mystery, but it doesn't really explain a whole lot or really play into anything other than kind of proving that they were worthy.
I think that the burning blade thing is so funny, especially when you consider the component of like Gracie being there as well for that part of the wedding. and it basically being like Lao Pan going, he's kind of responding to the whole thing in the moment, and he's like, oh, well, I can just do whatever the fuck I want. The prophecy doesn't actually matter. And to me, that is so well executed, because it does feel like at first he cares about like where she's from. She's from Hunan. You know, there's all these like different components of like it being a green-eyed girl, and it feels like at first you're like, oh, it needs to be a Chinese girl. That's the way that this old curse was written. And then he kind of just like blows past that, and he's like, no, I'm gonna take 2 wives because that's more fun. I'll kill one and then keep the other. And like,
I mean, he kind of found a loophole there.
Yeah,
but
right.
It's been 2,500 years of him looking for a Chinese girl with green eyes.
Yeah.
Then he's like, oh no, this white girl will do.
I know, which is also so good. It's so funny because all of a sudden he's just like, nah, I'll rewrite the rules. And that's, I think, when the camp really starts to like really punch through, is in this transition between the second and third act, where it just becomes ridiculous and intentionally so. And I think in particular, the performance of Lo Pan is so good throughout the film, like in both creepy mode and in like creepy old aged mode, by the way, which looks really convincing and really good. That makeup, that prosthetic looks incredible to this day. And then transitioning to him.
I was watching it on a 4K TV, so I was definitely like, that doesn't look as good as I remember it looking, but it's still fucking awesome.
The physical effects in this movie stand up better than most of the digital effects. All that said, though, the lightning looks really good and actually fairly real. Moves a little slow, but all that looks fairly good. Real, like, green explosion that happens also looks pretty good. The Oracle actually being a digital physical combo looked pretty decent, actually, still. Yeah. Definitely maybe the most aged part, but I was actually shocked by how good it looked, and I questioned whether or not it was maybe remastered and re-edited a little bit, but
I'm curious about that too.
I didn't see anything about there being a remastering, but I'd be curious. If a listener knows...
I've got the DVD at my parents' house. I could probably...
Oh, go check, yeah.
Well, I'll have to find a DVD player. Shit. I have nothing.
Don't you have an Xbox?
Oh, that's also at my parents' house.
No, well, you could just stick it in there and then check it.
I could grab that, but see if that is the same. I think the second showing of the Oracle, where he like licks his front eyeball with his tongue eyeball,
that was
looked a lot better than the first instance did.
Very true. That was some horror shit. That was like some straight like skin crawly. Like I definitely like just reacted to the idea of like licking your eyeball.
But it also wasn't in a hallway moving and floating. Yeah. So it was much more. It was probably a lot more practical than digital than the initial one was.
The interesting part about early like 80s graphical effects is that you can kind of see the interesting halo that's happening around wherever the edit for that digital improvement is happening, and you can kind of tell when they're penciling something over top because of that halo. And that's also why Star Wars is so renowned, is because it effectively did away with a lot of that haloing effect through different use of techniques, even though that was 10 years prior. Wild, right? It's just expensive to do.
It's crazy. Yeah. But how expensive was StarCraft? Jesus.
Much more expensive than this was.
Yeah. There you go. But blowing through that, let's I don't have a good transition to this, so we're just gonna kind of bulldoze our way through it a little bit. There's some more mystery introduced with the magic potion from Egg, which he gets into this like half circle bar and pours shots for everybody in these like elegant golden goblets.
It's like the zaniest part of the movie, to be honest. It's so wild.
But we never really get a clear explanation of what the potion does or what's in it. We get ingredients of, quote, wind, fire, stuff like that. What do you think the potion actually was? What do you think it actually did? Do you think it actually did anything? There's some things I'll point to in a little bit, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, so, I mean, to point to sort of the cultural reason that this would happen, the cultural reason is that like a drink for luck is sort of a common thing. That's, it's a Chinese trope, I would say. And so it fits to have it in here and to like go before battle to have this drink, this sort of ceremony. My question to you is, I think he asked what's in the bag. and he said wind, fire, and stuff like that.
Oh, he might have.
I don't know if that was what the drink is, but he did ask what the drink is, and I don't think he explained it. He's like, just some shit, dude. Yeah. And then he asked, what does it do? And he's like, well, it's for luck and empowerment and things like that. And they get into the elevator, and
before they get into the elevator, while they're toasting to this, Wang gives a kind of a strange toast. It's here's to God, what is it? It's like a toast to the American colors, essentially.
Yeah, that was interesting. You're right. That was one of the more interesting moments where it felt like it was kind of taking it seriously, but it felt like it leaned into the thing. I'm actually going to look it up here. Wang toast.
The colors that never run.
Here's to the Army and Navy, right?
Here's to the Army and Navy, the battles they have won. Here's to America's colors, the colors that never run. And then Jack Burton responds with, may the wings of liberty never lose a feather.
That line in particular, may the wings of liberty never lose a feather, I thought was really good. I was like, this is probably my favorite line of the movie.
Well, also the first StarCraft 2 campaign, Wings of Liberty, is all I thought of.
True. I actually didn't even think about that. I was questioning whether or not the here's to the Army and Navy and the battles they won, here's to America, the colors that never run, was... Man, I actually don't know what to point to with that line. It
seems very out of place. But not in a bad way. Like, it doesn't fit any sort of theme that I can think of other than like we're Americans and we're fighting this like ancient Chinese black magic, but that doesn't seem to track all that much either. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. The thing that I found very interesting when I was doing a little bit of research here on people, David Lo Pan is played by James Hong, who is maybe one of the most recognized voices in voice acting and in physical acting. He plays Lo Pan, as mentioned. He's also in Airplane. He's in Balls of Fury as a joke. He's in R.I.P.D. He was in Jackie Chan Adventures. He's been in so many things. I think he is, technically speaking, one of the most accomplished actors of all time. He was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're from Minnesota, so that's cool. And he was in the United States Army during the Korean War. They didn't send him out, and his reflection on that was that he was afraid that he would get... He thought about it, and he was like, I might have been afraid, like, if I was running back to our people, I might get shot because I look kind of like them. And then, the other way, they might think that I'm a traitor and they would definitely shoot me. There's no way that they wouldn't intentionally target me. So he didn't go to war. Part of me questions maybe that was something that like he was maybe thought or asked about or something like that. This is post, the end of Vietnam in 86, of course. Vietnam's been over for quite some time. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot that this could be, but I'm not sure on what it is. That was just the first thing that came to mind when I think about that line, is sort of Hong's experience.
Okay. Yeah, that very well could be
sometimes that
something
plays a
like
role.
that. Yeah, or even just more generally making a conscious nod to the Asian Americans involved in this production and highlighting the fact that they are Americans and they should be respected and treated as such, if that was sort of a point of contention.
Yeah, especially considering the exploitation that happened in early American history. So, yeah.
Right.
Critical to point out, of course. To get back to the juice, though, I think in the elevator, I think that it made everyone really horny. That scene in the elevator, that was almost like 20 or 30 seconds long, where everyone's like getting hot and everyone's kind of like looking around, smiling. Feels like it was maybe 20 seconds away from devolving into an orgy. Like, I just...
There's that sort of first finger and thumb like motion that they give to each other during battle all the time, that one of them gives it to Wang in the elevator, just kind of strangely. I can see that.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that was said about it is that it'll make you feel buzzed. And that was another thing that was mentioned earlier by Egg. And it's like, well, what's buzzed mean? And he's like, I don't know, buzzed.
Like big buzz or huge buzz or something like that.
Huge buzz, yeah.
Huge buzz.
I think this is also, is it this moment in the elevator where they start making out? Or is that later or earlier when Gracie?
That's the next elevator. There's a lot of elevators in this movie.
There's a lot of up and down, and like specifically pointing out, are we going up or are we going down? I'm having a hard time tracking where we are. Like, which is Also really meta funny because movies sometimes do a really bad job of communicating that. So, yeah.
So this is going in the elevator up or down. I don't remember which. I think down to the ceremony chamber with the big neon skull. Mm-hmm. Like with the cool fangs, where the actual wedding ceremony is taking place. And then this fight breaks out. Immediately, Jack Burton shoots his Uzi into the ceiling and knocks himself unconscious for the entire fight.
Well, for most of it. He does eventually boot knife a dude and gets stuck there.
Yeah, that's true. Which is also fucking hilarious. Yeah. But the one thing that I'll point to as far as maybe this potion actually did something is the aerial swordplay combat with Wang and the wind storm, where they're like literally jumping across the entire scene, kind of fighting with rapiers, I guess. And they're just jumping back and forth and like jumping across and like making one strike against each other in the middle. And then they're jumping together and fighting the entire way. And they land, and Rain gives him a strange look, and he just kind of raises his eyebrows in a knowing way. Like, what the fuck is going on there? Is it because of the potion, or is it just a weird, like, we had these zip lines or these fly lines, and we wanted to use them kind of deal with the choreography?
I think that this in particular is the biggest moment of homage to older Chinese cinema and sort of the martial arts movie that he was seeking to make sure that like a lot of these skills are also highlighted. That's also the reason that pre this scene, there's the like march that Thunder does while he's showing and doing the different sort of practice moves that you would do with the weapons that he's using. And then we also get Wind doing these sort of like overhead cuts with the sword before this. I think that, I don't know if the potion did that, because I think that the potion, again, made them horny, but also Wang was doing this before. And in Act 2, he was like jumping and flying and doing like decent backflips, not the crazy ones. But I also think that this is just when the camp explodes outwards. I don't know if it's so grounded in reality that it was the potion that did this, because I mean, Jack Burton didn't really get anything from the potion then, because he he should have been able to boot knife the dude off of him decently. The whole boot knife thing was cool, but yeah. I think that in particular, though, the like specific cuts that just cut to the sword on the screen with like the blue or purple backdrop are very much intentionally paying an homage to the filmmaking of the 50s and 60s and 70s for the original like martial arts movies. This is clearly that moment, and so they kind of let it be ridiculous, like it should be.
Okay,
in my
I can see that. I'm of the opinion, given that sort of idea, I'm of the opinion the potion did nothing.
Yeah, I think it just made him
entirely
horny.
Placebo. I don't think it even did that.
No, because they were getting hot and heavy in the elevator, dude. Like,
I think they were just reading into like we just took this powerful potion. How should we be acting?
I think that Eddie was about to make out with one of the other dudes. Like they were looking at they were giving each other hard eyes. If that Buddha at the bottom of the elevator wouldn't have opened up, you'd be hard pressed to not think that all those people are sprawled together on top of each other.
That's fair.
I'd be hard pressed. All that I'm saying is I don't know if I could be convinced otherwise, but I don't think the potion did anything outside of sprinkling an aphrodisiac for them.
That's pretty true. But at the same time, we've got, I guess this kind of feeds into the horny thing too. Never mind. But there's the other elevator where Jack and Gracie are going up. I think this time they come out in the area where the burning blade ceremony took place. But he's basically just parroting exactly what Egg had said the potion did. He's like, I'm seeing things normal people don't see, blah, blah, blah. And then they start making out, and he ends up with like that bright red lipstick in the very, I think that's what was used as the promotional art for a lot of this movie, was him with with Gracie in his arm and lipstick smeared across his lips after making out with her in the elevator. But
which is also a funny commentary that never fucking happens in movies. You know, like the protagonist after a makeout scene does not have that with the lipstick at the time. That would definitely happen. You're gonna get some transfer, dude. Like there's it's so genius. Again, this is just another moment where it's not just like good comedy writing. It's intentionally pointing out the things that other movies at the time were not doing right. And like, John Carpenter
exactly
parodied an action movie and also made something that was really intentionally focused on Eastern culture. Fantastic. Fuck.
Yeah. So good.
The other thing that I want to say here that I think we skipped over a little bit when talking about the battle scene, you make mention of in our script the Egg video game style battle between Egg and Lopan. And what's fascinating is when I was doing research, I also thought this when I saw Thunder for the first time. I was like, oh, like Raiden. And then I went and did searching, and literally the two of the biggest characters in Mortal Kombat are based on characters that are inside of this movie. They created these characters because of the portrayal of these characters inside of this movie. Egg is
really, I assumed it was the other way around.
Same. Interesting. And so when I actually did the research, my mind was blown. I think it's whoever is wielding it's Lightning. Lightning is the one wielding lightning. The reason that Raiden has the rice hat and everything else and is depicted this way. This is the origin point of the archetype of the lightning wielding hat dude. Period. Like this is where that is. And this is where that's cited going forward, which is wild. Lopan, being the soulless, fleshless guy, is another one of the important characters. Shang Tsung. I always forget this dude's fucking name.
Yeah, I do
but
too.
he is cited as he's the big bad in the newest Mortal Kombat movie. And guess what? They fucking look the same. The like actor and the portrayal and the makeup look almost exactly the same as the Lopan
as the old
does.
Dude, or as the
like younger version, the immortal. Yeah.
Okay.
Not as the old dude, but he continues to live because he extracts souls from people. That's the difference in Mortal Kombat. But I lost it when I found that out. I was like, oh my God, not only are you so culturally important, but you literally incidentally inspired two of the most like critical characters in fighting game history. Neat. Fucking go, John Carpenter and team.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that at all.
Yeah.
But I always drew a parallel between Lightning and Raiden.
Yeah.
So
right.
I'm cool with it.
So when I saw this, I was like, okay, so like you guys directly stole that. Got it. Neat. Good work, Mortal Kombat. Good work, Ed Boon.
But from here, we get to kind of the pinnacle moment. I guess you'd call it the climax of the film. There's still a lot of action that happens after it, but
wait. We skipped the love needle thing. Can we talk about the love needle thing?
Oh, we did skip the love needle.
The fucking love needle and the whole like reaction to that is insane and also very horny. Like he is getting off, and I think it's meant to be a metaphor for like sex on your wedding. Like it just like waiting until to have like sex on your wedding, like it's meant to kind of feel that way, but it is so obvious and also uncomfortable because it feels like he is coming in front of us. Like it is not.
Yeah. After not actually inserting anything.
Yeah.
Like he just kind of presses it up against her skin.
Yeah. And then he starts bleeding. I was like, what? Oh God.
But clearly he's just kind of pressing a sewing needle against her wrist. She doesn't start bleeding at all.
Mm-hmm.
But he's so excited and he's like, I'm mortal.
Yeah. He's just freaking out. But yeah, I had to make mention of that because I realized that it was missing here, and I definitely remember sitting there. I think I paused the movie and I rewound it, and I was like, this is we are leaning hard into this horny sex thing, aren't we? Okay, nice. nice. Act 3 culmination.
There we go. Oh, so good.
Yep.
But going back to what I was bringing up, the pinnacle of the movie a little bit, the killing of Lopan, which once again, Jack Burton is bumblefucking his way through this story. Mm-hmm. He takes his knife, has an opportunity, takes his knife and just throws his knife against the gong, just missing Lopan entirely.
Just wings it.
And you see his face like, fuck, shit.
Like, what am I going to do now? He's got the knife. Like,
but Lopan picks it up, giving him leaving gives Miaolin an opportunity to just run and hide behind Jack, which seems like an oversight on Lopan's part. But he picks up the knife and like just casually throws it very quickly. Like it's a casual throw, but it's very hard. Throws it at Jack, who catches it and throws it back and hits him square in the forehead, killing him. Mm-hmm. Like such a good ending to a villain. I loved it.
It's hilarious because, as you kind of mentioned, I think it pays off the line from the gambling den earlier. And to me, it feels.
Oh, I didn't mention that.
Oh,
I didn't mention it in the beginning either. There's the line from the beginning when Wang hits the bottle with the knife trying to split it, and it just shoots off the table, and Jack catches it and says it's all in the reflexes. And that's the exact line that he gives here after catching and throwing the knife and killing him. It's all in the reflexes. Like it's a good full circle moment in that.
It's also the only thing that Jack does in the entire movie that he's actually good at. He's not even good at driving his semi-truck. Like everyone else is freaking out and backseat driving him because he's bad at it. Like, again, Jack is an insert for an audience, one that John Carpenter clearly believes is incompetent, because we are, again, most people are very incompetent. And so whether or not we're willing to admit that, that's, as soon as you admit that to yourself, you get a lot better at things because you figure out how to do shit. So, I mean, that's the trick. That's the secret sauce, so to speak. Talk about that more on Speculative Knowledge in 2 months. It's kind of one of our topics, but it's so good and cleverly done, and the only thing that he really has, his master of one thing, is that he has good reflexes. And so like that pays off at the end, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Killing Lopan leads to killing all of the storms. There's Wind, who or Rain. I think it's Rain, Thunder, Lightning.
You said Wind, and I was like, maybe that's it. So I'm gonna just double check.
I think it might actually be Wind.
That would make sense. I didn't remember the third one. I know Lightning and Thunder.
Wind.
Yeah, that would make sense. That tracks.
He gets killed by Wang, who doesn't go and jump at one point and just kind of throws his blade and stabs him while he's flying. So that guy gets killed. The next guy dies after seeing Lopan dead, gets very angry, and basically just balloons up and explodes. And then the last guy, the lightning guy, gets hit with a Buddha statue and dies. It
is Rain, not Wind, but
it is Rain.
Peter Kwong, elemental master, expert martial artist with the sword. But Wind makes more sense. So,
well, but whatever. I love their death. I love how just kind of incompetent all their deaths were.
Yeah. Again, I think killing all the storms, as you kind of made mention of, is kind of egregiously incredible as it's portrayed, as Thunder like inflates himself and blows into a pile of skin lettuce that wetly flops on the ground. When that happened, I just went, ooh, that's a gross sound. That's a gross sound. And it kind of looked like lettuce. Like it kind of looked like they just took and dyed a bunch of heads of cabbage and lettuce and like threw it at the ground. And
I wouldn't doubt it. Practical effects and all.
I mean, it felt real, and it had that like wet kind of thud to it that you would expect from a dude inflating himself until he explodes.
Yeah. Sounded a lot like when you see those videos of people putting a shit ton of rubber bands around a watermelon.
Yes.
It sounded like that.
Yeah, it has kind of the exact same sort of feel. I wonder what the ADR on like that was on, like where they had the microphone to catch that sound. It's so funny, and again, it gets back to like Carpenter's thing with like the ballooning limbs, and the way that those kind of inflate feels very similar to the way that like in The Thing the people kind of melt when exposed. But yeah, it's so good in so many ways, because the entire movie has been subverting expectations, right? Thunder actually being like basically just enraged to a point of exploding himself because his master died is ridiculous, but that's that kind of plays into the whole thing. Lightning being actually bad at controlling lightning is great. Rain's the only one that really gets sent off in any kind of serious way. As like, I mean, I guess lightning kind of does too, because he gets the statue dropped on him to kill him, but he's kind of spending a lot of time trying to aim and shoot the lightning, but not really getting anywhere with Jack, who was also incompetent. Kind of comparing or contrasting those two. It's interesting for sure.
But even Thunder just gets mad and blows up.
Yeah,
like that's not competent either. Like they didn't do anything to kill him other than kill the other dude.
It's silly.
It's perfectly silly. I love it. Mm-hmm. But they escape. They get back to the what's the name of the restaurant? The Pool of the Black Dragon. I think
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, the Pool of the Black Dragon, which that was a really cool element also, because Wang was wearing that like black and yellow jacket with the name of the restaurant on the back. Mm-hmm. I liked the attention to detail that went into Wang's restaurant. But they get there, Jack's about to depart, he's got his truck back, all that stuff. He's having this conversation with Gracie and the reporter, what's her name? Margot, I think. Says, aren't you going to even kiss her goodbye or something like that? And he declines. Why do you think that is?
Again, I think that this is the entire movie has been kind of subverting expectations. And Jack in that moment is saying he can wait for her to come around, or they'll work things out after he kind of figures out what he wants to do next. And so it feels like there's like an agreement that this isn't the end, and him kissing her might have this like sort of final note to it, that he doesn't want to leave on that final note. He's like, no, I'm going to see you later. Like, I'd rather like go buy that truck that you just talked about with like the little apartment in back, which those exist, of course. And then like, fuck yeah, let's do that. And he's like pro that.
Yeah, so kind of I'm not kissing you goodbye because this isn't goodbye kind of deal.
Yeah, right. I think that's exactly what it is. And again, I think that this speaks to sort of the sequelization idea that John Carpenter would create an Evil Dead-like sequel, where like Evil Dead 1, Evil Dead 2, and then the third movie in the series, Army of Darkness, kind of completely departs from sort of the like campy turn on the story. It feels like this could have been the setup for Jack Burton to be this incompetent person, the sort of opposite note of most action heroes, and that we were going to get like some finality with like the orange orangutan like thing, and kind of that whole component. So it felt like this was building another note of like, this isn't the end.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Overall, then, what did you think of the movie? Did it live up to the expectations that I set forward by constantly recommending it?
So your expectations of recommending it were absolutely destroyed by my idea that this was going to be a product of its time and like a total racial blunder in the long part. I was so glad to have been completely proven wrong and to have that absolutely shattered and destroyed. This is I sent this in my family group chat a little bit earlier, but I had been talking about eventually needing to watch this all weekend, and I was like, man, I'm gonna have to watch Big Trouble in Little China. We'll see if it's good. I don't know, I'm concerned. And I sent a response text and I was like, Big Trouble in Little China is good, actually, ? And then went on to like just explode and gush about how shocked I was and why. You can literally hear me gush about how shocked I am and why by listening back to this hour and a half that we've talked through the show. Because this is such a good movie. Is it in my top 10? Probably not. But I would definitely say that this is one of my favorite John Carpenter movies. Like this fits such a great tone. This is so clever with what it does. It is definitely a commentary on its time, not a product of its time, which is excellent. Mm-hmm. Like, masterclass. This is insane.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that.
I bought it because I'm going to revisit it at some point, I'm sure.
Good.
I was like, this is too fun.
It's such a good movie, man. I love it so much. But I'm so glad you liked it, even though it took creating a new show for our Patreon supporters in order to finally get you to watch it.
Yeah, it's been probably like 10 years of you trying to convince me to watch this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's been basically almost as long as I've known you. But
yeah.
With that, I guess we'll sign off a little bit. Thank you again for all the incredible support that you've given us. This has been being released on Patreon for people that are supporting us already. So I'm not going to bore you with all the plugs that we usually do at the end of our episodes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's basically all I have to say. We hope this kind of leads into a better opportunity to present more fun one-off projects with you. We're looking forward to seeing what you think, and you listeners have access to our Discord server. So any comments, any thoughts, any whatever that you have, please write something on there. We'll be sure to pay attention and comment back and have a good conversation about it. So I'm excited for that access. This is being recorded before we actually make the Patreon live, so we don't exactly know how that's going to look, but I'm sure it's going to be a lot of collaboration, a lot of conversation that is going to be so much fun.
Yeah, we're very excited. The only thing that I'd want to add to this to any degree is don't forget about the other components that are also going to be on Patreon, like voting for and submitting ideas for what we might drink on the main show or perhaps on this show. Maybe there will come a time where we'll also take a recommendation from audience members and participants as well. First, we're going to burn through whatever PJ wants to talk about, but maybe we'll switch it up and do something else in the long run. Who knows? We've got ideas for other shows, which that could be an entire show in and of itself that, you know, we're very excited for. So thank you.
I definitely made this show title as vague as possible of PJ's Symposium of Media and Whimsy, so I can just kind of explore whatever I want. It doesn't have to be sticking to movies or whatever. So I'm open to suggestions, and it's gonna get a little loose and a little bit weird.
Yeah.
But I'm so excited.
I'm also very excited. The other thing that I would say is we do have the 2 additional shows to check out on the Patreon. So next week, you are going to get the very first episode of Hard Pan, where Andrew and I, our editor, production designer, he does all of our outro music and a number of other things. We will be talking about and comparing Goldfinger versus Bowling for Soup, their careers, their legacy, and otherwise. And then following that, our webmaster, Graybeard, and I, Tim Olson, are going to be chatting on speculative knowledge about a to-be-decided topic. But we believe we're going to do goals and how to set and establish things that you can actually achieve and how to create a reward system that actually works, that we've found successful. The final little note that I want to tag in about what also is coming down on the Patreon is if you are at our top tier, the $10 tier, Round on Me, you will also be getting at the end of the month a great opportunity to kind of have an AMA-like experience with PJ and I with some cocktail lists. We'll be hanging out, talking with everyone. And yeah, that'll be very exciting. I don't know that we've picked a topic or theme yet, right?
We haven't, but I think we should have a conversation about that.
Well, it's
sometime this week.
Again, that is another show of yours, so you can figure that out.
I'll figure that out. Sounds good.
But yeah, cool.
Perfect. Well, until next time, I hope you enjoyed this presentation of Big Trouble in Little China.
Yes.